Hey, good evening, everybody. Welcome on this blisteringly warm Wednesday evening. Who have we got tuned in? Hiya, Steve. First in. Good to see you. I think we'll have a bit of a fall through from Matt's show when that finishes in a few minutes. How's everyone's day been? Good evening, Leslie. Good evening, everyone, on this very warm night. It's very warm here in the garage. I've got a fan in front of me, but I've got a feeling it might be a bit noisy if I turn it on. I'll put it on. Tell me what you think. Tell me if this is. Can anybody hear that, or is that perfect? All right. Can I stay cool with that on? Unless anybody objects, I'm going to leave that on. Evening, Liz. Thank you for joining. Evening, Andy. Good to see you. What's it like where you are, Andy? Is it 140 degrees like it is here in Leeds? Now then, last week. Oh, can't hear what? Oh, can't hear the fan. Thanks, Liz. Oh, that's good then. That's cool. That will help me a lot if I can have a. Thought it meant you couldn't hear me. Last week, I heard I was a little bit quiet at the start, but if I do this and just talk away, can you hear my voice clearly? Can you hear my guitar clearly? Anything I need to adjust at this stage? I'll take a yay or nay from anybody at the moment. Andy says he's got his mankini on. I think I'm going to be physically sick. Never mind. But anyway, thanks everyone for tuning in. Good evening, Simon. Good evening, Justine. Assuming that Justine is with you as well. Thanks, Leslie. It sounds all right. That's good to hear. So on this balmy evening, we're going to be taking ourselves back 57 years, back to 1963, where it all started in terms of popularity and. Less stories this time around, because at this stage, in the first couple of years, they were just churning out songs for the sake of it, as almost like a songwriting factory, and just bouncing between recording studios and TV studios and appearances here, there, and everywhere. And obviously, 63 is the year they became very big in England, and 64 was when they hit America. And they'd been around for quite a few years. They'd had lots of different band names. They started out as the Quarrymen, which is where Paul met John back in 1957, I think it was, something like that. And they went from being the Quarrymen to the Nook Twins to the Silver Beatles, and then became the Beatles. And they were. Hi Maggie, thanks for joining. For years they were kind of trawling their wares around Liverpool, getting a really good reputation there, playing the Cavern Club, and finally, after trawling around lots of record companies in London, George Martin actually just happened to hear them by chance and thought he'd get them in just for a session and record one record with them. And famously, Brian Epstein went to Decca Records and a guy called Dick Rowe and played them the demo that they'd recorded in some studio somewhere. And he said he wasn't interested. In fact, his quote, which is now legend in the music business, is, "I don't want them, Brian. Guitar groups are going out." So a lot, you might think that was a decision to regret, but fortunately for him, he managed to sign the Rolling Stones the following year, so he kind of made up for it. So that's fine. So October '62 was when they actually released their first official single on Parlophone, which was "Love Me Do," and it came out on a red label. A picture for it there. And again, that red label mono version worth quite a bit of money if you've got some of that. Not too many of those around. They sell for a decent wad. Occasionally they come up on eBay. Subsequent pressings were on the standard Parlophone label, and those of you as old as I am will remember records that looked like that on Parlophone. But if you've got a red one lying around somewhere, if you can dig it out, you might have a small fortune on your hands. Who knows? So Love Me Do did all right. I mean, it got to number 17 in the charts, and that was primarily due to the fact that Brian Epstein ordered about 10,000 copies for himself, and it sold very well in Liverpool, where they were still very popular. And they needed a follow-up single, and George Martin had got them to record a song called How Do You Do It, written by an American guy called Mitch Murray, I think. And the Beatles did a fairly rubbishy version of it deliberately, and they actually said to George Martin, "Look, we're not recording other people's work. We're not releasing singles that we haven't written. this was unheard of in 1963. Everyone just, wrote songs that other people had written. And George Martin said, right, well, if you've got a better record than that, then play it to me and we'll see which one we put out. So John had been writing a song in his bedroom, he'd written it in the style of Roy Orbison, and John and Paul had finished some bits of it, but he played it to George Martin, who thought it was a bit of a dirge. So John went away and speeded it up and said, how about this then? And the guys played it to him, and George Martin just said, I think you've got your first number one. And that came out in January 1963, and that was Please Please Me. Now, a lot of these songs I used to do with my old band, the Zodiacs, so I'll do a few of them tonight. My usual excuse, can't get to the high notes, so I'll go low where I should go high. If you're listening and singing along, appreciate you do the high stuff. And I'll put my harmonizer on. A lot of this is going to be frantic, but let's have a go at Please Please Me. Last night I said these words to my girl. I know you never even tried, girl. Come on, 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 please, please me, oh yeah, like I please you. You don't need me to show the way, love. Why do I always have to say, love? Come on, 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 please, please me, oh yeah, like I please you. I don't wanna sound complaining, but you know there's always rain in my heart, in my heart. I do all the pleasing with you, it's so hard to reason with you, oh yeah, why do you make me blue? Last night I said these words to my girl. I know you never even tried, girl. Come on, 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 please, please me, oh yeah, like I please you, oh yeah, like I please you, oh yeah, like I please you. So there we go, Please Please Me. Oops, I'll just turn my harmony button off. That got put out as a single, and Mr. Martin was correct. It went to number one, sort of. Went to number one in I think it was something like Record Retailer chart, but the recognised chart was something like Music Week. I might have these details slightly wrong. It only got to number two there. So you'll often find it missing from a list of Beatles number one singles, because officially on the official UK chart it only got to number two. And it was a rip-roaring success, and George Martin thought, right, whoops, we're going to have to actually get an album out now very quickly. So they had four songs they could put on it already, which was Love Me Do and the B-side to Love Me Do, which was called P.S. I Love You, and Please Please Me, and the B-side to that, which was called Ask Me Why. And so, again, in terms of music history, it's pretty well known that they basically went to the studio, I think it was something like February the 10th, 1963, and recorded the rest of the album in a day. Something like 11 tracks or 10 tracks they recorded all in a day. And a tiny bit of overdubs afterwards. George Martin added a couple of instruments, but nothing of note. Effectively, the whole thing was done in a day. Something like 11-hour session or 12-hour session. They basically wanted to just reproduce a live show, because when they were looking at what tracks they could do, George Martin said, well, just do your stage show, and that's kind of what they did. And a lot of the tracks in those days were all kind of standards as well. So there's a lot of sort of what you might call more old-fashioned music on there. So they got the album recorded, and it was called Please Please Me, and they got a guy called Angus McBean to take the picture in an EMI building in the middle of London, which is quite a well-known picture now. Looks like that. And remarkable turnaround and stuff in those days. So the album was recorded on February the 10th, and a couple of days later some mixes out, and it came out in March the 22nd, I think. So just 6 weeks from recording it to having the cover work done and everything pressed. Quite remarkable. And in those days as well, most albums had like liner notes on the back. So the back had the track listing and a load of spiel. I'm moving my mouse here like you can see me, but you can't, so never mind, sorry. And it's something interesting about that very first album. I'm going to just zoom in. This is from the CD version. If you look at the song listings, ignoring the actual songs themselves, on the very first album, the songs they wrote themselves were attributed to McCartney and Lennon rather than Lennon and McCartney. That kind of stopped after about the third single, I think, but it only occurred on this album. I don't quite know why they switched to Lennon and McCartney. I mean, it flows off the tongue a lot easier potentially, but maybe that's because we've got used to it over the years. Who knows? I know that 10, 12 years ago, something like that, Paul tried to actually get the credits reverted to McCartney-Lennon, where he was the primary songwriter, but I think the rest, I think Yoko and the John's and George's estate kind of poo-pooed that, and he changed his mind. So it's probably a good thing. So 14 tracks on the first album, and I think 8 originals, 6 covers. Same thing with the follow-up album, but I'm trying not to do any covers. And there is a very famous cover on Please Please Me, which is Twist and Shout, which you need a band for, because there's lots of harmonies and ahs, the one that goes, to do that because we haven't got people to go and all that sort of thing. But it's a good example actually for the musicians watching of the fact that Beatles used to like using 6th chords and 9th chords to end songs with. They do it quite a lot. You'll hear it in some of the songs I'm doing tonight. A lot of the songs end, so if you do a normal like an F chord, it goes like that, but an F6 makes this extra note. A lot of that goes on in their songs, and 9ths as well. So an F9th would be, and you hear it in Twist and Shout. There's a 9th in Twist and Shout at the very end where it finishes. It goes, so quite it has this sort of definite sort of ring to it, that sort of chord, and you'll hear it coming up. So the album came out quickly, a big success. Spent 30 weeks at number 1. And was actually only unseated by the follow-up Beatles album in November of that year. And in between that, they had some singles out. So following up from Please Please Me was From Me to You, with John doing his harmonica. In fact, on the first 3 singles, there was quite a lot of John sort of harmonica soloing on Love Me Do and Please Please Me, and then From Me to You. And after From Me to You, they brought out, they just finished a gig, I think, in Newcastle, and were driving home or on a bus. They started just continuing writing, and Paul says that they used to do this eyeball writing, just 2 guitars opposite each other, writing and coming up with suggesting ideas. So they started writing this song, and they finished it the following day at Paul's house. And they put it to Paul's dad. They said, "Dad, I've listened to this, see what you think." And they played Paul's dad this song, and Paul's dad said, yeah, it's all right that, but do we have to have all the American emphasis? Why do you have to say yeah all the time? Can't you say yes, yes, yes instead of yeah, yeah, yeah? So they said, right, thanks for your input, Dad, and then politely ignored him what he said, which is probably a good thing. And the song they wrote was She Loves You, which I'll have a go at now. She loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah. She loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah. She loves you, yeah, 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 yeah. You think you've lost your love? Well, I saw her yesterday, yeah. It's you she's thinking of, and she told me what to say, yeah. She says she loves you, and you know that can't be bad. She loves you, because she loves you, and you know that can't be bad. Yes, she loves you, and you know you should be glad. She loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah. She loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah. With a love like that, you know you should be glad. You know it's up to you. I think it's only fair. Pride can hurt you too, so apologize to her, because she loves you, and you know that can't be bad. Yes, she loves you, and you know you should be glad. She loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah. She loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah. With a love like that, you know you should be glad. With a love like that, you know you should be glad. With a love like that, you know you should be glad. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah. And there's our six again. Everyone hear that all right? So that was She Loves You. And as I say, they were just constantly touring, doing shows, writing where they could, just churning out songs. And of course EMI wanted another single just a very short while after that. So John and Paul got together, eyeballed each other and said, okay, let's do another song. And John was sort of keen on being the leader of the band, and so he wanted his songs to be on the singles, and Paul wanted his songs to be on the singles. But this was possibly one of the last ones that they wrote where they were really just kind of working together, the two of them, in this sort of acoustic way. And this is the song that broke them in America. They tried with all their other singles to get to America, and it just wasn't happening for whatever reason. So they enter the charts every now and then, and lower reaches, 150 in the charts. And they deliberately set about trying to write an American style song. Well, I don't know if it sounds that way to me, but and this is what they wrote. Oh yeah, I'll tell you something, I think you'll understand. Something, I wanna hold your hand, I wanna hold your hand, I wanna hold your hand. Oh please, say to me, you let me be your man. And please, say to me, you let me hold your hand. I wanna hold your hand, touch you, I feel happy inside. It's such a feeling that my love I can't hide, I can't hide, I can't hide. Yeah, you got that something, I think you'll understand when I say that something. I wanna hold your hand, let me hold your hand, I wanna hold your hand. And when I touch you, I feel happy inside. It's such a feeling that my love I can hide, I can hide, I can hide. Yeah, you got that something, I think you'll understand when I say that something. I wanna hold your hand, Hey, and guess what? That song finishes on a 6. So there you go. That's the secret to a successful songwriting. End every song on a 6. Thanks for singing the 6 for me, Simon. Appreciate that. So, put out I Want to Hold Your Hand, went to number 1 in the UK, did very well in America in the next year, which we'll talk about in a couple of shows' time. In the meantime, they recorded a second album. And again, just sort of picking stuff from their stage show, very much similar to the first in terms of content and stuff. And the second album was called With the Beatles. Quite an iconic cover. Shot in a hotel corridor somewhere, can't remember the city, but not a lot of touching up on the picture. It just kind of, that was the one they liked the most. It kind of looks slightly sort of charcoal-y drawing, but that's how it came out. There is a bit of story to the cover in the fact that to make the pictures, the heads the same size and in a square cover, the photographer asked Ringo to sort of go on his knees for it, and he had him at the bottom because in theory he joined last. So there you go. Don't think it was anything. And the back very similar to Please Please Me, liner notes and stuff like that. And again, quite a lot of covers on this song. Not a lot of big Beatle records on With the Beatles, not really. But still, as I say, took over from Please Please Me at number 1 in the album charts, so you know, we did really well. It's not one I go back to very often. There's a couple of Beatles albums, and one I'll talk about in a later show, which I think are sort of the weakest of them all. And I think With the Beatles is down there really. There's two of the, you know, the albums I don't really go back to because the songs aren't great, the solo songs. But there's a couple of little gems on there, and there's one on there that I'll just do 2 seconds of. I'm not going to play the whole thing. Because you know, I used to have a bit of a fun banter with a friend of mine about, you know, who was the best band, the Beatles or the Rolling Stones, and I always used to just go with okay, how many singles did the Rolling Stones write for the Beatles? Oh, that's right, none. How many singles did the Beatles write for the Rolling Stones? And the answer is 1. And the Beatles and the Stones became friends. It was kind of friendly rivalry, and they just had the first single out, the Stones, called Come On, Chuck Berry song, and they were looking for another, and they hadn't really started writing their own stuff at the moment. So John and Paul met them somewhere in a studio, and they said, we need a new song. And they said, well, we're working on something, just give us 10 minutes. And they went away in a corner and came back with the song, which they just gave to the Stones, and the Stones had their second hit single with it. And the song's called I Want to Be Your Man. And they gave it to Ringo to sing on the album, you know. I don't think they thought it was anything particularly good. They just tried to mimic a famous guitarist called Bo Diddley, who would tend to just kind of do, you know, on one chord and stuff. When they did that with I Want to Be Your Man, in 30 seconds of it, it goes like that. Well, I want to be your lover, baby. I want to be your man. I want to be your lover, baby. I want to be your man. I love you like no other, baby, like no other can. I love you like no other, baby, no other can. I wanna be your man. 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 Something like that, anyway. Stones had a hit with it. It sounds quite different, the Stones version to the Beatles version. There is a harmonica and stuff on the Stones version. I don't know if anyone knows the version by the Stones. So they moved on, got the second album out with the Beatles, and there's one song on there that John thought was fabulous of Paul's. He very rarely would say anything nice about Paul's songs. I mean, literally, the whole of the Beatles, he probably only less than half a dozen times had something really positive to say. But Paul wrote a song. Mainly, he wrote a lot of songs about his girlfriend at the time, who was the actress Jane Asher. He went and moved in with her parents in London, and he would write songs about her, or you know, saying he was missing her. Later songs became a little bit more kind of, twisted. Things like "We Can Work It Out" is effectively about them having a row. But at this stage, he was madly in love, and he wrote this song. And I've struggled with this song, just learning this, only because as a musician, you kind of get used to songs that you expect the chords to go a certain way, and your brain automatically is ready to play the next chord. And this song doesn't quite follow that pattern, so it's kind of baffled me. But let's give it a go. This is a song by Paul called "All My Lovin'." This is an important song in their history, because this is the song that they opened the Ed Sullivan Show with in 1964, when half of America stopped what they were doing to watch the Beatles. Absolutely massive audience, TV audience for the time. I think it's held the record until the finale of MASH, the TV show, in 1982, I think. Anyway, let's do a bit of "All My Lovin'." Close your eyes and I'll kiss you. Tomorrow I'll miss you. Remember, I'll always be true. And then while I'm away, I'll ride home every day, and I'll send all my loving to you. I'll pretend that I'm kissing the lips I am missing, and hope that my dreams will come true. And then while I'm away, I'll ride home every day, and I'll send all my loving to you. All my loving I will send to you. All my loving, darling, I'll be true. Close your eyes and I'll kiss you. Tomorrow I'll miss you. Remember, I'll always be true. And then while I'm away, I'll ride home every day, and I'll send all my loving to you. All my loving I will send to you. All my loving, darling, I'll be true. All my loving, all my loving, all my loving, I will send to you. Very good song. So that was All My Loving. So I thought I would try again this week to do another video clip. Now last week I played a little clip of Paul and nobody could hear it, and that's because the software I'm using to broadcast to you, when you want to share something, has a tiny little checkbox at the bottom that says share audio, which I hadn't checked. Now I've checked it this time around, so we'll see whether this works. This might be a bit flickery and jerky, because I'm trying to share a video with you, and it's also a clip that was originally in black and white, but someone's colorized, so it also looks a bit weird, but it's worth a look at. So it was actually broadcast in April '64, but it was actually recorded in December '63, and at the time the Beatles were promoting with the Beatles, so I thought I'd show you it. It's just really cool. Effectively, we had the biggest band in England at the time, the Beatles, sharing a stage with the biggest entertainers of the time in the UK, which was Morecambe and Wise. So this is a little clip of the Beatles on the Morecambe and Wise show, 2 or 3 minutes long. Bear with it, and then we're going to do a one more song and then wrap up. So see what you think of this, and if you can't hear it, quickly put something in the comments and I'll give up on it. But here we go, Morecambe and Wise and the Beatles. So that was quite loud, I think, but never mind. So there you go. Hopefully you all heard on that. Sounds like they're all having a good time, and it's great to see them all together there. Much more calm and sedate now. Back to me. So I thought I'd do you one more song, and I thought I'd go back to the beginning of Please Please Me, the very first track, which they wrote, I think about 1962. And there was a poll a few years ago of the best ever opening track to a debut album by anybody, and this won it. So let's do this. This is I Saw Her Standing There. 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, she was just 17,